The dawn of the 20th century brought the automobile, and that meant the old wagon roads just weren't good enough anymore. Now, Interstate 5 didn't happen overnight. In between, there was a succession of constantly improving and changing roads. The way out of town, out of Santa Clarita to the north, was known as the Ridge Route. I'm Leon Warden, and this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. Tonight's guest is not somebody who's lived in the Santa Clarita Valley for a long time, but he's been instrumental the last, decade or so in preserving a particular piece of Santa Clarita history, often single-handedly. He's known as Mr. Ridge Route. His friends call him Scotty, and his name is Harrison Scott. Thanks, Scotty, for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.
Now, when we're talking about the Ridge Route, what era are we talking about? What is this Ridge Route?
Well, the first highway was constructed in 1915 and actually went on the very peaks of the mountain between Castaic and basically Highway 138. About 29 miles were actually on the ridge top. That highway was superseded by the Ridge Alternate in 1933.
Okay, now wait a minute. Why would they put a highway across the mountaintops instead of like in the valley like the freeway?
Well, first off, it was the very first mountain highway that California ever constructed over such a forbidding terrain. In fact, they sent a contingency of engineers to Europe to see how they constructed their mountain highways. And the reason that it was on the peaks was because it would minimize drainage problems.
Oh, okay, so to stop flooding or... Okay.
Exactly.
Now, if it's on the mountaintops, it must have had a lot of curves in it. I mean, that would get busy after a while.
Yes, World War I was approaching, and they didn't have a lot of money to, or equipment, as a matter of fact, to go through and make straight cuts. The road actually had 697 curves, which equated to 110 full circles that you drove between Castaic and the bottom of the Grapevine.
Really? Now the Grapevine, isn't the Grapevine the same thing as the Ridge Route?
It's part of the Ridge Route. The newscasters constantly get this incorrect.
Okay.
It's the 6.5 miles from Fort Tejon down to the entrance to the San Joaquin Valley, to the little community of Grapevine.
Right, so from the top of the grade, that's where the Grapevine starts, and then goes down into the Kern County side. Basically.
Exactly.
Right, okay. So if you're talking Ridge Route, how many miles are you talking about from Castaic to Tejon?
Well, from Castaic to Tejon, the whole route today on I-5 would be around 35, 37 miles. It hasn't varied a great deal. Of course, with I-5, the road was straightened out considerably.
Sure. Now, when how would cars negotiate these curves? I mean, how long did it take to get from, LA to Bakersfield in 1915? How did the cars get up the grade?
It was a persevering 12-hour drive to navigate the entire route. And cars didn't have a great deal of horsepower. In fact, my John Deere riding lawnmower had more horsepower than the early Model Ts of that era.
Did they carry extra gas on the running boards or something like that?
Not so much gas, but they did carry at least 2 gallons of water and extra food. They used the canvas bags to contain water for emergency purposes. And they were also, it was also recommended they carry different degrees of cotter pins and washers and nuts and bolts. And a towing rope in case of an emergency.
Yeah, I'll bet. I mean, today you call the Auto Club. Was the Auto Club around back then?
I believe the Auto Club was started in 1901. I should know that, but I can't say for certain.
But when the road was built, didn't the Auto Club put up, I know the Auto Club used to put up a lot of speed signs, didn't they? And
most certainly, and they did the signage on the 1915 alignment. In fact, the routing for the procedure for putting up the signs was they had allotted a 2-week time frame. But at the last minute, they were only given 24 hours, and the Auto Club, hurling a Moreland truck, a high-powered Moreland truck, actually erected 150 signs on the ridge route prior to its opening. In fact, people complained that there were more signs than trees.
150 just from Castaic up to Tejon?
Yes, and ultimately they removed most of them, just putting a sign. In fact, there's one here somewhere.
Oh, yeah, you brought some photos with you.
At the beginning and the end of the route, yes, that would be it.
This one, warning speed limit 15 miles an hour. Was it 15 miles an hour on the whole route?
Well, actually, for motor cars, yes. If you were driving a hard rubber tire, before pneumatic tubes on trucks, tires, they had hard rubber, and those trucks were restricted to 12 miles an hour. And they enforced the speed limit quite in an unusual manner. You couldn't very well turn off the ridge route. Once you were on it, you had to go to the other end. Consequently, they knew how long it took. So the motor cop, policeman at Castaic would hand you a card with the time. And if you arrived at the bottom of the Grapevine prior to when you should have, you were summoned. You were given a ticket.
Right. Now, I've seen the old Auto Club maps, and they show a road going from Los Angeles all the way to Bakersfield. Now, where is that all the ridge route, or did the ridge route really start in Castaic?
The ridge route, technically, all three of them, the 1915 road, the 1933 ridge alternate, better known as U.S. Highway 99, and today's Interstate 5, all start technically at Highway 126 or Castaic Junction, where Telegraph Road or Highway 126 heads west to Ventura.
Right.
And it ends at the bottom of the Grapevine.
Okay. Now, I know you went out with Margie Clark from The Signal recently and took a look at some stops along the way of the ridge route. Let's go take a look at that now.
All righty.
Hi, we're here with Harrison Scott on a brand new road leading to North Lake Community. It doesn't look very historic, so Harrison, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's very, very historic. The Ridge Route Highway, the 1915 road that actually tackled the mountain barrier between the Los Angeles area and the San Joaquin Valley, went right up this route. Actually, here at the North Lake Housing Development, the road was changed a bit when they did all the building here. The original road went off towards Castaic Lake Drive in front of Castaic Brick and then went up through a canyon. But if you take the ridge route off to our right here on camera, it will eventually rejoin the original alignment after you pass through the housing development. And that's the nuts and bolts of the reason why the road looks so new here. It had to be changed when the development took place. Right. The ridge route actually went up on the very, very peaks of the mountain, right on the very peak. That's why they called it the ridge route. And it was constructed in 1914, opened in 1915, right, and went right through the community here of Castaic. Down in Castaic, one of the first establishments was Sam Parsons Gas Station, which location today would be the Days Inn Travel Lodge, just below the intersection at Castaic Lake Drive.
Well, now it's changed quite a bit, obviously. Now, what are some of the things that people could have seen along the way back when it was in its original state? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Were there restaurants or hotels or anything like that?
Most certainly. Right here on the old ridge route, there was, back in the 20s, was the Evergreen Café and Auto Court. A number of gas stations, but more prominently probably remembered by people would be Benny's Beanery, which was actually on the ridge alternate in Castaic here. It was a favorite hangout for the Highway Patrol and others. He had his famous navy bean soup and ham, and people would come from miles around just to take of his tasty meals there.
Yeah. Okay, we've driven a couple of miles up from the North Lake community, and the road's narrowed a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about this area?
Yes, behind us here is a large water tank, and this was the location of Nellie Callahan's old shack. She was known lovingly as the Witch of the Ridge Route. She was a very self-reliant person. Actually, the history, real quick, was her sister, Leo Vihilda del Campo Martinez of Ventura, married Thomas Marple of Marple Canyon below us here, of Leawood, England, and Nellie was her sister. And there was a lot written about Nellie chasing what today is Mobil Oil Company, General Petroleum, years ago off of her property with a shotgun when they put their petroleum line through here in 1911. But that was actually Leo Vihilda down in Marple Canyon that did that. Now, also at this location was a famous sign. Just at this first curve directly in front of us was the Sunfreeze ice cream sign. A large stone structure, had stone pillars on each side, and was made out of concrete. And it survived the road's closure in 1933. And when the ridge alternate was put in below us, you could still see this famous old sign.
Isn't that something? Now, can people still drive on that old road there?
Absolutely. You can proceed all the way to Highway 138 on the north, just south of Gorman.
Okay, Harrison, how about these power poles over here? What about that?
Margie, those were put in by Henry Huntington's Pacific Light and Power Company in 1913 to bring electricity from Big Creek, which is up above Sacramento, down to Los Angeles to power the red and yellow trolley cars. They supplied power, and it was one of the biggest plants ever constructed by private money.
Okay, now we're up the ridge route a little ways more, and as you can see, it's started to curve quite a bit more, and we've run into a little concrete. Can you tell us a little bit about this, Harrison?
Yes, when the road was originally constructed, it, of course, was concrete, 20 feet wide, 4.5 inches of surface, or of concrete, and they had planned to put something over the top of the concrete. But at that point in time, nothing was sufficient in their minds to meet their requirements. So ultimately, they never did put anything on top of the concrete until years later. They did surface it with asphalt, which you can see behind us here. They did put a layer of asphalt down. But more interestingly, if you notice the curb off to our right, the road was right up on top of the peaks and very dangerous, as you might suspect.
Right, I can see that there's quite a steep drop here.
Exactly.
Steep, yeah.
And there wasn't any room to put wooden barriers up. So with the early cars, the Model Ts, they put in these substantial curbings. So if you got too close to the edge, you would bounce, the tire would hit the curbing and redirect you back onto the highway.
As people were traveling along the highway, where would they stop to refuel their car, to refresh themselves? Can you tell us a little bit about that and where we're standing here?
Certainly. Margie, there weren't a great many venues to stop at, but this happens to be one of the more famous ones. As near as I can tell, this location, the Ridge Roadhouse, went in about 1918. And what it was a filling station, a cafe, and directly across the highway from where we're standing was a small grouping of green and white sleeping cabins. So it was run by, from my research, Porter Markell and his sister Ruth. And he was a cripple man. And what was interesting is, said there was a very fair lunch in one of the Auto Club books. You know, he was a very reasonable person. You can see remnants as you can elsewhere on the ridge route if you know where to look. Here's a stone wall over to our right, and we're standing on the foundation of the original filling station, hidden in the brush, I might add. Just like this foundation we're standing on, if you know where to look along the highway, you can still locate the remains and foundations of the various establishments.
Very interesting. I'm Margie Clark with Legacy.
You don't see a road made out of cement too often. Now, what are some of the other things that you can see along the way, remnants of old buildings and things like that?
Well, there are several locations, but you'd really have to know where to look. Perhaps the most prominent would be the Tumble Inn and also Sandberg's. The Tumble Inn was a stone structure surrounded by a beautiful stone wall, which is still in place. but the buildings have been bulldozed over into the canyon below.
Well, that was like a hotel or a restaurant, or what was the Tumble Inn?
The Tumble Inn was a small lodge purported to have a beautiful view, which it did, and it actually looked down towards today's I-5. And the Tumble Inn was on the northern end of the ridge route.
Right.
There was a small lodge, sleeping facility, and it had an eating cafe and a Richfield gas station and garage. It actually wasn't, I don't believe, built until around 1925 or 6 is when it sprung up.
So there were stops along the way. Now you mentioned Sandberg. What isn't Sandberg a weather station?
Yes, it is, and they still, Bald Mountain is a United States weather station for the FAA. Still very much in use, however, it's automated. And sometimes listening to television, you'll get a report of the weather from Sandberg's, and nobody knows where Sandberg's is.
Did people used to live in Sandberg?
Well, actually, it was originally a planned community. The most prominent thing that was there was the Sandberg Hotel, built by Harold Sandberg, Harold, H-A-R-A-L-D. Sandberg in 1914. He built it prior to the road opening. It's a 3-story structure and quite elaborate. They had a sign out front, no truck drivers or dogs allowed. This is where you would see the Packards, the Cadillacs, the Pierce Arrows, the Studebakers. It catered to the carriage trade.
Well, speaking of catering to carriage trade, I mean, I've heard stories about Sandberg and, ladies of ill repute to cater to people, travelers.
It's a bunch of baloney. It sells newspapers, but there's no truth in it. Sandberg never ran anything of the sort. However, Mr. Sandberg passed away in 1938, and after that there was a succession of owners to the hotel. One gentleman brought in questionable activities, and this could have been possibly something that occurred, but it's not substantiated in any records. Nothing.
Well, I don't know what records there would be to substantiate something like that. But what about later during the war? Weren't there German spies operating out of Sandberg?
More nonsense. Lillian Grogin was running a pottery plant there. California originals, and she sold beautiful pottery to like the department stores in Los Angeles. She had problems, but she was never sending messages to the Germans. That's
problems?
Fabrication.
Let's switch gears for a second. I see that you brought some photos with you. This looks really interesting. I guess they're laying the cement here?
Absolutely. Well, I'm not sure exactly where it is on the route, but the road was 20 feet wide, 4.5 inches of concrete, and it was reinforced every 18 inches with rebar.
Okay. I see here that photo is 1919?
1919 is when they paved the road.
Yeah. Now, what's this bridge?
Well, the postcard inscription says that it's the Castaic Creek Bridge, but that's incorrect. Actually, that's the Santa Clara River Bridge.
Santa Clara River?
And the foundation, that bridge was taken out in 1928 when the St. Francis Dam ruptured, and it swept the truss steel bridge completely away.
Was that just west of today's Interstate 5? Or?
It's west of today's Interstate 5. It's north of Magic Mountain off of Feed Mill Road, the foundations of which are still in place.
Now, here's a photo of a hotel, a big elaborate hotel along the route.
The Lebec Hotel was built by Thomas O'Brien and Cliff Durant. Cliff Durant was the Playboy son of William Crapo Durant, the founder of General Motors. And he helped finance this very elaborate hotel, which was the watering hole for all the Hollywood elite. Clark Gable, Carole Lombard.
Really, up in Lebec? Up in Lebec?
In Lebec.
Okay.
Yes, and it was a first-class hotel. Had their own power plant and everything. It was quite elaborate.
What happened to it?
Well, over a number of years, it fell into disrepair and had water problems with their plumbing and sewerage system. The hotel also supplied water to the local community, and that was the problem. It went into receivership. The Tejon Ranch Company purchased the hotel. They set it aflame in 1971 and then bulldozed the remains and buried the concrete on their property.
Well, talk about eliminating all memory of something.
The only thing that remained
That's the way to do it.
2 cypress trees out front is all that locates the hotel today.
Now you've got some snow pictures here. What are we looking at here?
Well, that's a view this is the road as the ridge route descends towards Antelope Valley. Coming down would be north of Sandberg's, and it shows the trucks traversing the highway in the snow in the winter.
Now, here we talked about some of those big curves. This is called, I understand, is this the Serpentine Drive?
Most definitely. This is an aerial shot. Well, actually, it was taken on one of the peaks up towards the power lines at the mountain there. And Serpentine Drive was the climb coming from the Castaic end to the largest cut on the highway, which was Sweet's Cut, also known as Big Cut, Culebra Cut, Castaic Cut, all the same location. This cut was dug with steam shovels, power steam shovels.
Right.
But the use of the power equipment was extremely limited. The road was constructed with Fresno scrapers, which were basically scrapers pulled by mules.
Was that all when they, in 1914-15, when they dug all that?
Yes, 1914 is when the highway was being built.
All right, now I got to ask you. You know, you're so up on all the details of this, and I've got to wonder. You, I understand, are a retired telephone company engineer, and you live in Torrance, right?
Yes.
Now,
yes.
How do you get interested in something way up here?
I don't know, but it's been expensive going back and forth. I was on my way to Visalia in about 1991 with my youngest son, and we were traveling north, of course, out of Castaic, climbing 5 Mile Grade, which is today the northbound lanes of I-5. And my boy commented that it must have been a very rigorous, arduous effort for the early automobiles. And I said, well, this isn't even the original road. And I jumped off at Templin Highway, having gone on the original road back in 1955 when I purchased my first automobile to go to work for the telephone company. I found the route, and we traveled it all the way to Highway 138 on the north. And I thought to myself at that time, this has to be saved.
Which you did then. Basically, you know, all by yourself is from. I mean, you've been quoted in the LA Times, Daily News, Signal, Bakersfield, Californian. You even made the Auto Club's Westways magazine in 2001. Now, you're responsible, I understand, for getting the road listed on the National Register of Historic Places, right? I mean,
Yeah,
how did that come about?
I started the procedure knowing nothing about it. I wasn't even a member of a historical society at all, and I just started telephoning and asking questions because the road, in actuality, hasn't been disturbed. Think about it. This is on Angeles Forest property. Roads in a similar era have been changed, widened, annihilated. This demonstrates early highway engineering, and I thought it has to be preserved.
And it was placed on the National Register in what year?
September the 25th, 1997.
Well, got it down to the date.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that one sticks in your mind. Now, you know, you formed a Ridge Route Preservation Organization. In a perfect world, what would you like to see? Would you like to see it go back to the original cement?
I would like to see it maintained in an arrested state of decay. In other words,
Yeah.
I would like to see portions that are gone replaced in the natural engineered fashion that it was originally built, if funds were available and so forth. And hopefully our organization can bring attention to this effort.
Keywords. That would be wonderful. Now, you know, I hate to say, but we're out of time. So if you want further information on Ridge Route and its history, you can go to, ridgeroute.org on the internet.
No, it's ridgeroute.com, www.com.
Okay, ridgeroute.com. Don't want to steer people wrong. And for all your Santa Clarita Valley history needs, you can visit scvhistory.com on the internet or stop by the Saugus train station Saturdays, Sundays 1 to 4. And this is Legacy, Santa Clarita's Living History. I'm Leon Warden. Thank you. Good night.